on my own, broken and alone. I feel the rain crashing down all around this empty town. I'm searching for the lost and found, but you don't care, you're unaware. Keep moving like the scars aren't even there. It's in the air like a blazing flare. Just stare 'cause the flames will burn us. I thought you were the one for me. That's why I gave you everything. Held you close by the stormy seas. Oh, you meant the world to me. I used to kiss your head when you cried for me. Hold your hand while the pain was over. Keep you warm by the roaring sea. You meant the world to me. Oh, you meant the world to me.
A very, very good morning to you, wherever it is that you have logged on to watch this incredible moment with us. It's Women in Conversation, brought to you by McDonald's. A very, very special day today indeed, because it's International Women's Day. So we thought we'd gather some brave, strong, fearless women to talk to you all about what it takes to be a successful and amazing woman in 2021 with everything that's been going on. My name is Babi Muloy and I'll be your host and facilitator throughout today. Just a quick reminder that if you are on social media, please send tweets, send screenshots even, and let us know what your thoughts and questions are. You can use the International Women's Day hashtag, which is the hashtag choose to challenge, or our hashtag, which is Women in Conversation. We'd like to welcome all of our viewers and audience, our McDonald's SA staff, the McDonald's SA customers, our Exco and media as well. So before we start, let's have a look at how we would like to celebrate women on International Women's Day.
All our women, Dumelang, Molweni. As I look back at our journey through 2020, I reflect on the 8th March, which was International Women's Day, a day we celebrated, and we also launched our Semi-Mark Square restaurant, and we dedicated this restaurant to the women of McDonald's South Africa and all the strength they stand for. The world is currently facing a pandemic that has swept across the globe. COVID-19 has both affected each and every one of us. In South Africa, we've also seen a rise in gender-based violence. I want to acknowledge every woman in McDonald's South Africa that has been affected, whether yourselves or a member of your family. The Women's Leadership Network South African chapter identify with your feelings, and we support you, and we are here for you. My hope is that in the midst of all of this, we continue to draw strength from the conversations we've had and the programs that encourage women supporting women. In closing, my message to us during this Women's Month is that we shall not turn our backs, and we shall continue to be available and to ensure that women continue to rise. WLN is wishing you a very happy Women's Day, and throughout this whole Women's Month, may your days be filled with goodness and warmth. Igama labafazi malibongwe.
Makes me feel emotional, malibongwe, because there is just so much that we plow into society and that has been plowed into us. So absolutely, halala igama labafazi. So it's a face that you recognize because she is in the building and such an integral part of how things work here at McDonald's SA. So I'd like to introduce to you our first panelist who's sitting right here with me. We call this the McDonald's studio It's somebody's office, but it's our McDonald's studio. McDonald's South Africa's Chief Operations Officer, Joanne de Wet. And of course, she started her career here at McDonald's SA as a trainee manager back in 1995, holding a Bachelor of Commerce degree in Business Economics and Industrial Psychology from the University of the Western Cape. As a member of McDonald's Global Women's Leadership Network, Joanne, I had to introduce you first because you're sitting here with me. I had to say hello.
Thank you very much, and welcome, and happy International Women's Day to you as well, Pabi.
And to you. Thank you very much. So now let's go around the room, the virtual room as it were, and introduce all of our panelists to you, and we can find out exactly who's going to be taking part in our conversation today. A voice that you've just heard, Maureen Mtoninji, who is the Director of Operations, McDonald's SA, is also here with us. Of course, Maureen is a very familiar face when it comes to McDonald's SA. Maureen is a dynamic and accomplished business leader, currently directing the strategic and operational function of the McDonald's SA business as the Director of Operations. Maureen, are you there? Can you hear us?
Hello, Pabi, and happy Women's Day to all the women that are watching us and even the women in the studio. And you look beautiful, Pabi. I just want to say happy Women's Day to everyone. Ikamalama Malibongwe.
Thank you very much, Maureen, and we'll be touching base with you as the questions roll in from everybody who is watching. You can, of course, send those through as well. Next up, we've got the Kantar Chief Growth Officer, Africa Middle East, Karen Duchenne, who is here with us to share just the inspiration over this incredible 25-year career, 25 years of experience in driving marketing, communications, and customer experiences that deliver business results for local and multinational clients. Karen has a passion for mentorship as well as mentoring a number of rising female stars. Karen Duchenne, welcome to you.
Thank you, Pabi. Lovely to be here and to be with such a group of wonderful women celebrating this day on a wonderful Monday morning. I'm in Cape Town, it's gorgeous, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Joanne and I just went, ooh, do you miss Cape Town?
Come and join me, and if you could bring me some coffee, I'd be most pleased.
We'll email you some, Karen. We'll email
you some.
Exactly. All right, so next up, we've got somebody very important from a business point of view. And this is a young woman who runs Chic Beauty. The CEO, Masego Kunupi, joins us as well during this International Women's Day discussion. Prior to her embarking on her business and entrepreneurship journey, Masego studied economics and worked in the procurement field for just under 2 years, and then that entrepreneurial calling really hit home. Chic Beauty was a way to start a company that reveals to women not only their outer beauty, but their inner disposition as well, waking up what is dormant within them. I love that. Masego, welcome to you.
Good morning, Pabi. Happy International Women's Day to our panelists and all our viewers.
Fantastic. So let's start with you, Masego. Being a business person during the COVID-19 pandemic, all of the lockdowns, all of the regulations that businesses had to really be quite agile in order to perform at the best level. I want to know what your opinion is on the role that women have played in creating some sort of equality during that time for your business, and also the way forward in recovery post-pandemic.
Thank you, Pabi. I think we can never answer anything from today without just looking back in history, and I think we can take it back to the women in 1956 that marched to the union buildings, your Helen Josephs, they sort of shaped the pursuit to equality. And yes, we woke up last year one day and the government said, we are in a lockdown, don't touch your face. And my business predominantly is touching faces, so I woke up and was told there's nothing that I can do. The way that I operate is no longer okay to operate in. So I think the biggest thing, and my favorite words, women empowerment, it was a time for us to diversify, to give women more skills, even though it wasn't through a contact base, but through online classes and mentorship. So I think it was very, very important to diversify. That's been the biggest thing. I think every entrepreneur should be able to adapt. Adaptability has been the biggest key. And I think we've played also somewhat of a role at Chic Beauty by giving women skills, even though it wasn't the same way we used to do it, but we just had to find a new way of operating.
I mean, I'd like to expand that question a little bit, and anybody can chime in from our panelists about shaping a more equal future. We hear some of these statistics about, how much a woman earns to the dollar that a man earns, right? We hear a lot about the glass ceilings that prohibit women from succeeding. How do you think, as women who are in leadership, we can open up the way to make sure that there is more equity and equality in the future? Joanne, maybe I'll start with you.
I think the first thing that comes to mind is our hashtag that we're celebrating today, Choose to Challenge.
Yes.
So that would be my first response. The second thing is, it's very difficult to contribute to the empowerment of women if you are not sitting in a seat of decision making. And that's probably one of the most challenging things for women, is to actually get into that position first. So I think once those that are there, we have an obligation and a responsibility to ensure that that equality you've just referenced, Pabi, is something that we deliberately contribute to, and we are deliberate about the transparency around equality, even in earnings or even in a role.
Even in earnings.
Even in earnings,
Yes.
and even in a role.
Yes.
Because sometimes you can have the earnings, but you're not necessarily, you've got the title of the role, but you're not
Right.
necessarily exercising the decision making. So for me, that's, I think it's what I've said in the beginning, choose to challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a receptive and open feeling towards that challenge? Speaking truth to power. Maureen, Karen, maybe you want to jump in here, where we can hold each other as women in leadership accountable.
Indeed, I agree with you fully. Pavi, that is why I'm so proud of McDonald's, because we introduced the WLN, Women's Leadership Network platform. It is exactly a platform that gives women an opportunity, to voice, how they want to be empowered. What are the areas where we can develop, improving as an organization? Because indeed, in order for women, to be taken up to the next level, it is important that we have a culture in an organization that embraces the unique contributions that women can make in an organization.
So let's talk a little bit more, Maureen, we'll stay with you, about the importance, the value, and also some of the hows when it comes to women's full and effective participation in the workplace.
Pabi, it is important for us as women. Yes, an organization must create an environment to embrace women to grow and to be involved and to be included, However, it's important for us as women also to challenge and, request, or rather get involved in cross-functional meetings, cross-functional teams, request to be part of projects that is contributing meaningfully to the organization, not just, projects that is just projects for the sake of projects, but projects that will contribute meaningful to the organization and the results of an organization. And what I love about us here at McDonald's, and in fact also in my previous work, is that you will see that 62% of our workforce are women. And those women are they're in decision-making positions. They're running restaurants. They are regional managers of restaurants that have got a profile of 20 million, 14 million. And what I love also is that when you've got leadership, for example, your CEO, your top structure that embraces inclusion, and diversity in terms of decision making in the strategic imperatives of the organization, then only women can be regarded as they are indeed involved. So, inclusion and diversity is imperative to take an organization to another level.
And I like what you said, Maureen, about in the position that you're in now and in your previous position, you're seeing a lot of these changes. I would dare to say that you've had an impact in a lot of influencing how things work on the ground. And I suppose that can tie in with something you're quite passionate about. Karen, tell us about the importance of mentorship and really, as you take that step up, reaching back to hold somebody else's hand to follow suit.
You make such a very important point there, Happy. I think that Joanne mentioned how important it is that we do have more women in decision-making positions. And unfortunately, in South Africa, we're looking at the latest stats from PwC of something only like 14 women out of 300 odd CEOs in the largest companies are actually only women. And I think when you are, if you're in a role like yourself, Joanne, as a COO, a very important part is to take people along and to be the role model that gives people the aspiration and the belief that it's all possible, and we have to take that responsibility seriously. And I love the mentorship role because I find that I learn a lot, because often you don't see everything that there is to see. And when you're in conversation, you see the daily struggles that many women are facing in their daily lives, where they may have sort of, maybe let's call them more paternalistic expectations, both from the business and at home. And they have to sort of break through that and still be their own beautiful feminine selves, being impactful and effective in the workplace. I think that is a role that we can actually help each other to be more impactful and to realize how important role modeling actually is. Because when we see what good looks like, we want to be like that. And I've been very fortunate in my own career in that my very first CEO was a very incredible woman, Margarita Patter, who ran the business that I started at, which was called Research Surveys at the time. And she was just the most incredible leader. And I never ever thought of myself as a woman, just because she was there and she was the boss. And so we all behaved like, and she was bold and feisty, but feminine and empathetic. And, that made me never think twice about, well, I could also be there. And I just carried on doing my job as I would, contributing, making a difference. But I had that role model at the helm, and it was really impactful for me. So yeah, don't underestimate how important it is to actually, as you say, live your job and do the most that you can, because you're impacting others in your daily life just by doing a good job yourself.
I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, everybody on our panel, right? I want to know specific ways that you've found that you can break the age-old stereotype that women in the workplace or women who are vying for leadership positions will try to be antagonistic towards each other or possibly bring each other down, right? I want to know, because we hear this, it is a view, some of us have lived it and seen it, but as Karen is explaining, the other side also exists, which is such a powerful and bold space to be. So can we talk a little bit about how you actually go through, and dispel that myth and break down wherever you see that possibly happening?
So let me take a shot at it first, Bobby. I think for me, and I can only cite through my own experience,
yes.
So I think very similar to Karen, what stood out for me from her comment is that whoever the senior person is that you're looking up to, and in my instance, it was a male.
Right.
It's the values of the organization that is reflected through their being. When they're leading you, when they're guiding you, they're not necessarily micromanaging you, but they are creating an environment that allows you to reach your potential that may potentially benefit the business.
Right.
And I think that's, if I think of my 25-year-old career with McDonald's, and it feels like I worked for multiple organizations over that period of time, that was the one thing that I recognized is something that I very often, in a very informal manner, share with many of the men and women in the organization. I think so. That's my first response. My second response related to something that Karen said, being able to have access to individuals that can also give you information that allows you to make business decisions that benefits the business, but at the same time caters for a personal need.
Yes.
And the example that comes to mind is, I think more than 15 years ago, we introduced a car scheme for all our restaurant managers. Because one of the requirements of the role is you have to have flexibility to work at different locations as well as different working hours.
Right.
And as Maureen has just mentioned earlier, more than 60% of our workforce are females. So can you understand the dilemma when we're having to protect the people that we lead,
Yes.
still allowing them and giving them access to tools to deliver, on the job was critical. And so just the car scheme that we thought is something, it's not big from an organizational
Made a big impact.
but it made a big impact in the lives of the women that are working and in the coalface every single day.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Masego, from a business point of view, so we've heard now maybe from a corporate point of view, but from a business point of view, I mean, your business and the person who does the eyelashes down the road and the person who does the nails down the road, you're all in competition. But is there a way that we can have a kind of business sisterhood? Can that exist? Have you seen it happen?
Abby, it definitely can exist, and it does exist, especially in the beauty industry. I think if you're looking from the outside in, we look like we're in competition, but we are in collaboration. And that's one of the biggest way to come out of this pandemic is to collaborate. So with me and people in the industry that we know, we have collaborated on some campaigns. We've collaborated also on pricing. Some people in my area, we've kind of wanted to say, let's give a certain price, let's stay in the same bracket, let's give certain discounts together. And when I have more clients today, I will send half of them to you and vice versa with you. So there is a lot of collaboration. And I mean, with people just in-house that work under me, I allow them to also work in their own businesses. So they work for me a certain number of days. And then when they are not with me, I challenge them to do something under their own name. So I challenge my staff to have ownership, and that sort of kind of propels their brand, and they get more skill and they get more exposure, because I even expose them to the people that I'm exposed to as well.
Oh, that is dynamic. That is dynamite. The more ownership we feel in what we do, the better we will be custodians of that. And of course, then passing the baton of knowledge to somebody else will be something to do. That is wonderful. I hope that somebody has tweeted that, and please retweet the person who's tweeted that with our hashtags Women in Conversation, as well as our hashtag Choose to Challenge. There's something that you said, Joanne, about talking to the women around you as well as talking to the men. And we think about women empowerment, as these women talks that we must have, or teas, or where we wear fancy hats and we get together and chat. But really, this is something that needs to be dealt with, obviously, as women who are experiencing it, but men can be allies, and in a lot of ways will open doors for certain things to happen. So I'd like to ask you more about that. And Maureen, if you can stand by, maybe as someone in the Women's Leadership Network, you can talk to us about men being allies to the cause.
So for me, it's important that we include the men, because some of them are still in key decision-making positions. So if we alienate the men, and if I had to make a statement to say that the reason why women feel they're not empowered is because they're being alienated by men,
right.
The reverse, we've got to be very conscious that we're not guilty of the reverse.
Yes.
We also have to include them because many of the men lead women.
Yes.
So they need to understand the parties that they're leading, how to influence them. In McDonald's, we've got certain competencies that we look for. One of them is leading with influence. And in order to lead with influence, you need to understand the audience. You need to understand the people you're leading. So we are very conscious of not leaving the men behind. Many of the men, I will say to you, have been key sponsors of my career. And in some instances, in a very sad way, probably the women, not so much, but more the men. So the opposite does arise. And I felt, for me, I've been that benefactor of men believing in me before women.
I have the exact same experience in my career. I started out as a child in this career and moving on into spaces like this, I had to, as you say, be sponsored, right? Have somebody who would advocate for me to the channels, to production houses, and that key person was a man. And several times later that has happened. And so that's why I think it's often very, very interesting for me to talk about how the men can forward this movement as well. Maureen, your thoughts?
Pabi, this is such an important conversation. Really, really important. I first want to start by saying the pull her down syndrome is a reality. Let me say that. I'm sure we'll have another time to talk about that because it's a very, very big conversation. And because I interact with a lot of women share these things. And Pabi, on the Women's Leadership Network, we had sessions with women in the restaurants, we had sessions with women in the corporate office, we had sessions with women outside. And one of the, and Joanne knows about this, one of the most talked about topics that came out, or rather themes out of the sessions, was that women are saying, let's support one another. Women supporting one another. You will see also in the video, I mentioned there that women want to be supported by other women. Now, in terms of men, I want to make a great example to say that in my 30 years of leadership, Pabi, my mentors and the people that I've been blessed with to catapult my career are men. And the sponsor of our Women's Leadership Network, McDonald's South Africa, Africa, our chapter, is our CEO, Greg Solomons. He is the sponsor of this platform. So that alone should then make us realize that it is important that women are supported by men to drive this conversation for us, to be relevant and pertinent and to be included in decision making and strategic imperatives of organizations. But Pabi, I want us to have another session. Oh, I want to say that we're also going to have, what I like about this, Pabi, is that today is an example of us as women. Not only we want to position ourselves, but we're involving everyone on this, on this conversation. And one of the things we are going to be doing through the Women's Leadership Network conversation with women is that we're going to be having monthly sessions, or rather bi-monthly or quarterly, and we're not just going to have Maureen and Joanne and them speaking. We'll give other women an opportunity, and that is to take them up and to include them. So this is a beautiful conversation, and that is why we've got conversation with women. We want these things to come out.
100%. And I suppose you'd be open to suggestions of things that are happening, any one of our viewers right now who's experiencing something that they'd like some guidance on, or maybe they feel they themselves are more of an expert and would like to contribute. Please let us know. Use that hashtag Women in Conversation, and we'll pick up on that. Joanne, you wanted to add something else?
And I think there's one thing that for me, I think sometimes women underestimate. We very often focus our sponsorship on people in the organization in which we participate in. And I've got to just say one thing, that I'd probably not have been as ambitious as I was coming through the ranks if I didn't have a sponsor at home. So when I joined McDonald's, I was already married. And my key sponsor, who probably identified a type of contribution I could make in a corporate environment, was my husband.
Wow.
And I think that was, I didn't realize it at the time, but it's probably more liberating reflecting on it now than actually experiencing it at that time.
Well, maybe we need to have a session on how to pick a husband, how to pick a partner, because that sounds like an extraordinary member of your team, Joanne. And I'm sure you've heard the other side of the story as well.
And I've got a big team.
Exactly. Karen, I know you've been across the globe in your career, and I'm just curious, do other countries fare differently in how they vie for equity and equality for women? Where does South Africa rank in your view?
Yeah. So, by the way, just to add to Joanne's point, my husband has only ever expected me to be equal. And like he would like me, excuse me, why aren't you, doing your bit? I think is a wonderful endorsement to have when your partnership at home as well. But if I look at what things are happening, we actually have something called the Reykjavik Index, which looks at women in leadership. We've done it for the World Economic Forum. And what we see is that there are some cultures where it's absolutely expected. In the Nordics, for example, where women are in many leadership positions. We've got New Zealand, where we've got a prime minister in leadership. But in some of the what one perhaps could call more traditional markets, the UK, the USA, even now to this day, where there's been a lot of inclusion and diversity initiatives for many years, there's still only a very low percentage of women in leadership positions, right? Less than 30% in many cases. And so this is a job to be done where everybody is given an equal opportunity to be offered those leadership positions and to get ahead in the business. But I'd like to pick up on a point that I saw in the chat from Pamela Lepoko. And she was saying it's so important that children, young ladies, are exposed to the possibilities and are not put into these gender stereotypes from such a young age. And what we've seen as a business who supports many clients around ensuring that they are doing the unstereotyped job, right? And that their communication is progressive. Because the more we showcase people in normal jobs, normal lives, as equally capable of doing everything, men and women alike, okay, it's equality that we seek. And I just wanted to call out, because I see the Mac Cafe on your table there, but last year, if I look at our first year's most successful ads, most liked ads, and we do this every year, we look at all new campaigns across the business. But the Mac Cafe ad actually came in second. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a piece of communication where the lady goes to choose some coffee, and she's a beautiful, successful business person, and she's just looking for a simple choice. And she looks at all this drama, and she wants a great quality product. And that progressive portrayal of a great decision maker, and she just says, look, I'm going to cut the crap, and choose what I want. It's a lovely portrayal. And the more progressive the advertising is, the more successful it is. And I think we as communicators and leaders have a responsibility to ensure that our communication is progressive. And in the communication industry as a whole, by the way, we did the She Says survey last year, which looked at all gender roles across the communication industry. And what we saw, although there's 62% of people are women in the advertising industry, in the leadership position, that is reversed. It's 62% of the leaders are men. So how do we get to a place where the people that are driving the decisions around communication, that are portraying women in the most progressive and front line way, that creates a perception that we are actually all equal? That's a challenge that we need to overcome as well.
And I think that over the time that we speak in these sessions, we'll break down from a leadership point of view how we can begin to make that happen. If you have any questions, if you'd like to ask our panel something in particular, then please pop it into the chat over there, and then can our production teams just send it through to me so that I can make that a part of our conversation as well. And keep using that hashtag Women in Conversation. So it's been mentioned a few times. I enjoyed the way Karen talked about how women are expected to act in a patriarchal manner, right? And we know, I have only just learned, because I'm a very, very new mother, some of the ways that I have to choose. I have to choose whether my career will suffer or whether my home life will suffer. And sometimes it feels like a very unfair choice. And only in speaking to other women who've walked my specific industry's path as a mother and as a successful broadcaster have I learned, oh, this is a little trick you can use, or that's a little way that you can bypass this or that or the third. So let's talk about all of these different hats that we wear. Obviously, not all women are moms, but we are homemakers, we're carers, we've got so many different aspects to ourselves. How do we bring that, first of all, into our careers, because every single part of ourselves makes us glorious? And then also, how do we give to our home life as much or with equal impact as we give to our work life?
I'm assuming that's for me.
Yes, Joanne, yes, that's for you.
I think in the early days of my career and being, when I joined McDonald's, newlywed, 3-month-old baby,
Wow.
and, just trying to find my feet. Truthfully speaking, in the first 10 years of my career, I spent a lot of time feeling very guilty about not necessarily spending as much time in a family environment or giving my family an almost equal or better share of my time. And I think over time, I've learned that because I was so focused on the word balance, we always talk about work-life
Yes.
balance, and I could not get it right. And eventually I sort of surrendered to something that I refer to as harmony.
Okay.
Where I said, when I feel good, even if I'm working, 70% of my time is work focused in a particular week, but that 30% of the time I have a meaningful impact, even on a personal level, then I would probably end the week in a position of harmony. And one of my sons, Matthew, my third born, Matthew, said to me in 2008, he made a very profound statement. He says, Mom, when I was born, you were a working mom. The only thing that I'd want is that you prove to me that you love me. And the second thing is that you're there for events that's important to me. So you're just not with me all the time. But when you are with me, it's important. So if you come into my house, I've got a messy little fridge with little events that's significant to the boys.
Yes.
And between myself and my husband, Denver, we find ways either to be there together or for one of us at least to be in attendance.
Wow. I'm taking notes furiously in my mind. That is very, very important. Is there somebody in our panel who'd like to jump in there, where we talk about this almost pressure to be in constant balance, but is that even possible? How do you achieve that? Or other tips and tricks on how to circumnavigate that? Karen, Maureen?
I'm happy to contribute. I'm also a mother of boys, and I do see
Wow.
it as an important role, is actually raising men that have the right perceptions of women too. And I cherish that role. I've got a wonderful relationship with my boys, and I do believe that as a mother that works, and I've always worked since having my children, is it does actually teach you how to be more focused and to really choose the things that matter. So both at work, what you don't waste your time on, what is important, where am I making the biggest contribution, and at home, what are the moments that matter. So I would always try and make an effort to always be home for supper time and bath time when they were little. Right. And now as they're teenagers, that time is still an important time, and we prioritize that as a family, is to have discussion over dinner, right? Because we've got to connect with one another. And that if I needed to then catch up on emails or do what I needed to do after that, I'm happy to do that. But that time is important to me. So I think it does teach you how to put the correct boundaries. Because if you don't prioritize what's important that your family is important and your job is important, no one else will. So I think that actually having to do more actually teaches you how to make better decisions from my perspective.
Yeah, the mothering of boys is quite a thing, right?
I think it's a privilege.
I was going to say, we've actually got the advantage because
Yeah.
our change can start at home.
Yeah.
That role modeling of
Yeah.
what the boys would expect, the role of a woman in the house, the role of a woman in a professional capacity, in a spiritual capacity. We've got the privilege of role modeling that to our boys, and that they can, it may influence how they perceive women.
Absolutely. I'm the mother of a boy, and I always prayed for boys. No offense to us ladies, but I thought, what am I going to do with a girl? It's a very different kind of privilege that you have with a girl. And so what I'm finding is in his mind, right, what a woman is shaped every day by what I am. Yes. And so I talked to him about, well, these are mommy's goals in my work and at home. Or, this is the way we speak to each other to show each other respect. And then also just purely physically, I'm finding that I have to work out a heck of a lot just so that I can keep up with him physically. And we're playing Naruto and we're jumping and we're squatting. And I'm finding that it's really bringing out the best in me in a lot of ways, and I'm enjoying that process. But it can be quite challenging to balance the two. So I don't know, Maureen, if you'd like to add something to that question before we move on to the next one.
Hubby, it can sometimes be very difficult to balance. I must say, I have got children. I now spend a lot of time with my grandchild. But previously, it was just work, 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 because I wanted the best for my children. I wanted my children to be in the best schools, to be in the best, stay in the best, vicinity, safe. But I think what is important, Pabi, is that because my life was work, church, was that I had to make sure that when I am at home, I am fully present. Like my daughter would say to me, Mommy, you don't look in my eyes when you talk to me. But I had to learn. My children, used to teach me to be fully present by the questions they asked me. But there's one thing I always used to make sure that on a Sunday, I must have lunch with my family. That was a policy. But you know what I love about the previous places, because I used to work in retail before, retail clothing, and now I'm in food, is that what I love about McDonald's, and that is why when you're a woman leader, it is important to make an impact. One of the things that I'm very particular about, and my teams will tell you, is the way how people are being scheduled for shifts. Yes. When I go into a restaurant, I want to know how are they scheduling Pabi? How are they scheduling Maureen? Why does Pabi always go home at 4, but Maureen has to work all the time overnight? So it is important then for us as women leaders, and even that we teach our men, that when you run a business, you must be cognizant of the fact that you must embrace family values. How do you do that in the way you operate your business? And that is why at McDonald's we've got shifts, and one of the responsibilities of our area managers, which we call the ops consultants, is to make sure that when there's a schedule on the board, does everybody get equal time off? Is it done fairly so that people can have time with the families? And those are the things. That is why, Pabi, when you're a woman in a leadership position, you must practice, you must have empathy, because you're not just affecting the person in the workplace, you're actually affecting them holistically as a human being.
I actually get quite emotional, Maureen, when you talk about that, because I've been in a position where I'd just given birth and my schedule was changed to a point where I couldn't have time to bond with my newborn. And there was some stuff going on in the background that I eventually was able to sort out. But what I saw was my decline in my mental health because I was away from my newborn, then impacted my ability to deliver in my work, and it's a total vicious cycle. And we wonder then, about people leaving jobs, that turnover issue. We wonder about those things, but it is down to somebody just consciously going, but hang on, this person's had this life change. Yes. How can we make this more fair for everybody all around? Masego, I'm not leaving you out there. I don't have the information about parenting and yourself, but I mean, there are other aspects to being a woman, being a teacher. I've recently learned of this term about sandwich caretakers, right? Where we caretake for our children that we've brought to the planet, but also we're often in this position where we have to care for our parents and elders as well. So I don't know what you'd like to add, please, Masego.
Babi, I think just from a business perspective, we've mentioned so many, they might seem trivial, things like scheduling, but it makes a huge difference starting a little bit later, because I do employ women. I employ women who are mothers. So I do know that some mothers would need to start a little bit later because they want to be able to drop off their children at school. And that's probably the only amount of time they get to bond with their children, just on their way to school. So even in our scheduling, it's something that we really look at. I love encouraging my staff to start a little bit later, and we try to finish also a little bit early so that they can be part of their children's lives. There are days when they come to me and they say, Masego, look, I need to pick up my child's report from school. I might be late on Thursday because I need to be there. I'm a single mother, I've employed single mothers. And I would change around the schedule so that it can fit them. I'm not a mom yet, but when it has to happen, I do stand in for my staff because I don't really have that much responsibility. My parents are still, well, in their 60s. I consider that to be still young, so I don't really, I don't really need to take care of my parents. So I do stand in for my staff that needs to be moms from time to time. It's very important. Little things like that helps you to retain your staff for a longer time.
Yeah. So
Maybe
as a business owner and as a leader, you know what's good for your team. Karen, go ahead.
And maybe just to build on that, listening to the conversation and reading a lot of the comments in the chat, a lot of the panelists are talking about just how much pressure it actually is to try and be working and a mother. And I think that one of the blessings of lockdown has actually been that many fathers got to have far greater empathy for just how challenging it is actually to be a parent, and a very active parent. And many fathers are actually almost denied that privilege because somehow in our societal structure, men are meant to do X and women are meant to do Y. But I've had many fathers in our business come to me and say, Karen, please, can I continue to be able to spend more time at home or to work more flexibly because I'm enjoying this time with my child? And Stats SA launched some statistics just a week or two back that said that something like less than 80% of people in South Africa grow up with both their biological parents in the home. 90% grow up with their mum, right? But less than 70% are growing up with their biological father present. And I believe as we go to equality, it's the more we actually together in this and we share the load more equally, and there aren't these traditional gender roles. Actually many men would like to be more participative, but there's kind of an expectation that they need to do X and we need to do Y. So I think getting to diversity and to proper inclusion means we all have a chance. And I think that more men having been exposed to what a challenge it is has actually heightened that empathy for that, children need love and they need a lot of energy from you. And trying to give the energy to work and home can be very challenging.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point. I haven't followed on the chat from the very, very beginning because we've been sitting here and I've logged on. And my goodness, this motherhood conversation has really just blown up. I think sometimes, and Joanne, maybe you can tell me if I'm on the right track or not, we almost feel that we have to hide some of these kind of gender-specific, very impactful issues in the workplace in order to seem like we are competitive.
Or that you got it together.
Yes.
So I think the one thing that I appreciated about working for this brand for so many years is being able to express moments of vulnerability.
Yeah.
Moments where, and I can tell you now, it's easy to look at me today and obviously assess, my position within the organization.
You've got it together sitting here today.
Hell no. But it wasn't an easy ride. The road was not straight. There was a lot of things that I had to learn along the way. So
Right.
I do want to say to any woman that's already a mom, that's pursuing a career, or potentially considering having children, because I do think it's a choice.
Yes.
We're in a very progressive society. So for some women, just not having children, it's okay. I would say to the ones that are either having, our parents or embarking on having children is, it will always be a learning journey.
Yes.
Because your child is unique to you. The circumstances in which you find yourself will be unique. There may be similarities to other women, but you still have to find ways that works best for you and your child. It does help to be part of an organization that is okay for you to reach out. I mean, I'd phone Greg and say, I'm dealing with a family crisis.
Right.
I don't want to go into the details, and he'd respect the fact that I don't need to go into the details. But I need to pack up and go to Cape Town for a week. Is it okay? He says, take your emergency leave. When we come back, I'll just assess if you're okay. If you're okay, it's business as usual.
That's incredible.
But it does take a level of boldness even from the leader to allow you to share it. Because I do know of, in other organizations, leaders are very uncomfortable when an employee is facing a personal dilemma.
Yes.
And very often they would say, you know, I'm not best qualified to deal with the situation. Perhaps you find external support. And sometimes all the employee wants is for you to say, it's okay. You don't have to divulge. Tell me how much time you need, and we as an organization will adapt accordingly.
Well, I mean, I'm going to go here because it's a very real and prevalent issue in our country about gender-based violence. And it's one of the questions that's come up in our panel. Hashtag Women in Conversation. Thank you for using the hashtag. That is from Zama Kumalo. How is McDonald's SA supporting women regarding GBV? Are there safe and reliable platforms available to help women cope with such? Joanne, can I give it to you?
Yes. So from a human capital perspective, one of our employee value propositions is we give them free access to professional counselors that can assist them, not just from a gender-based violence perspective, any financial dilemma, anyone that needs support that from a professional level, even a restaurant manager would feel insecure to dealing with.
Right.
So from our restaurant staff all the way to corporate office, we've got access to counseling facilities. We've also, through the Women's Leadership Network, and Maureen can probably expand, even in our workshops, women would raise comments around, sexual harassment and how do I deal with it. And even though as an organization, we've got policies that govern how we would deal with it and what the consequence would be for anyone found guilty of it, I still find you're really taking women to a vulnerable space, and please don't underestimate the men that get abused by women.
Oh, yes.
In their households, which for me was a bit of a rude awakening at some stage as well, and that they may need guidance. The one thing I will say is that I think it was in 2020, the men of the organization, sponsored by Greg, had started an initiative that speaks out against abuse of women, something that they will not tolerate. A trust has been formed, and the women that are wanting to pursue or even get out will be supported by an independent legal entity called Fluxmans to be able to pursue an exit out of a relationship that's uncomfortable.
Oh, that is so important. That is so, so important, because I think that sometimes we can pay lip service, especially with gender-based violence. Maureen, if you can stand by to add, as you know, the WLN at what you're doing. But yes, we pay lip service, get out, go to the police. But actually, it is something that requires very strategic planning and then also a lot of support in moving out and starting a new life. Maureen?
You know, Pabi, Joanne has brought up, she's given most of that, what we're currently doing. But I just want to also add is that, you know, the men that has come together with our CEO, Greg Solomon, to drive this, non-negotiable, they don't have tolerance for gender-based violence. And you'll see, Pabi, if you go to our restaurants with drive-throughs, we've got flags in our yard, in McDonald's. And one of the flags is that we've got that flag that says McDonald's South Africa does not, is against gender-based violence. So we're actually standing up and saying no to gender-based violence. But what is also very nice is that we are encouraged as an organization, men and women, everybody, to contribute through our salaries towards this fund, to support the women that experience gender-based violence via this, as Joanne has explained to you, the collaboration that they have with the legal entity. But that is why we have got conversations with women. There must be a platform for women to be able to know that they can come up and talk. And some women are not going to want to speak out, but that is why, as a woman, you must be accessible as a woman leader, accessible, and also you must show empathy so so that people can come to you and talk about things. You know, Pavi, I've got one woman that I just came into a restaurant one day, and then she just called me aside and she told me something that touched me. And I said, wow, why would this person tell me this about their upbringing? That is so touching. But it's the way you treat people with dignity and respect, the way that you make yourself accessible. And you know, Pabi, I know you know that lots of people call me Mum Maureen at McDonald's. They don't call me Mum Maureen because of my age. It is the way people feel in your presence that you can be motherly and they can talk to you about things. It's not about your age. It is the presence and the spirit you give off to people that makes people to know that they can relate to you and they can connect with you. And that is important as a woman. We must stop wanting to be men. We're not men, we are women. And so we've got something that's very special that helps both men and women.
Oh, I love that so much. I'm thinking I'm nearing my 40th birthday. I'm going to be called Mum Baby sometime soon because it happens to me too, where people do come and talk to me. And I suppose that sensitivity and then coupled with the fact that you're in a space where you can make something happen, you have that kind of agency, can really lead the way. I'm going to move on now in our last 11 or so minutes of this conversation to read some of the comments. Melisha says, I'm a full-time mom of 4. They're aged 6 and under. I'm also a student and an aspiring entrepreneur. Halala.
Brave.
Very brave. The choices and decisions are difficult, but I tend to put my children over and above everything else. Gamogelo says, good morning and happy International Women's Day to you too. On the matter of maintaining balance between home and work, especially as a young mother in a new career stream, we're not taught to navigate that. We're made to seem weak when we require rest or time to recuperate, especially coming from women who do not have children. They tend to believe that we're excusing ourselves by the mere fact of being a mother. So we've spoken a little bit about juggling that space. And we've spoken, Masego in particular, spoken about as a business leader. There are definitely ways that she's making that impact, and perhaps other business leaders can start moving in that way. Motsehwa says, being a mother and having dreams can be the most difficult thing, but we need to be role models. I have one daughter and I want her to know that nothing is impossible. Nice. Then we have a request for Joanne Maureen and your team. For the next Zoom seminar, can we please have some more upcoming businesswomen as well? So that we can have some guests who've been in and out of various industries and they know the various ins and outs. I had one here that was particularly for you, Masego. There we go. Pamela says, I love what you're doing for our single mothers, Masego, taking into consideration that people have lives outside of the workspace. That's really brilliant. There's so many. I won't be able to get through absolutely all of them. But there is a competition and a prize that is up for grabs. So please keep sending through your questions, your comments, what you'd like to know. There will be 10 lucky attendees who will be chosen to have a coffee session with Maureen and Joanne at a later stage after the session. So get your questions in and we'll make sure we make that announcement in the next few minutes. Cultural sensitivity, some of the issues that we've spoken about, maybe we can wrap things up. And Karen, I'll start with you there.
Yeah, so I think that, just sensitivity in general across all dimensions of inclusion and diversity. When someone comes to work, we know how pervasive gender-based violence is in our country. You don't know what they've been through the night before, and if they overreact on some certain things, maybe it's just about taking a step back and understanding that and just bringing sensitivity to the workplace. I just wanted to say thanks in my closing to Greg for supporting this initiative. I think it's wonderful and being led by the top of just how important it is for us to have conversations as women, and thank you for including me in today's event.
Brilliant. I just got this question in, and so with your thank you and your goodbye, we'll add this to all the panelists. What has been that one key lesson that each of you has learned and that has guided you throughout your career? So you can tag that on there, Karen.
I would say the one lesson is be who you are, be yourself. You know, you are a woman, right? You are, you've come from your own unique experiences, and each one of us will bring something to everybody else if you are yourself. So continue to be you, would be my lesson. Don't try and be anyone else.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Karen. Masego, will cross over to you. The last few thoughts that you'd like to share with us this morning, and then as the question from Kim Silate says, what's that one lesson that's guided your career so far?
Thank you so much, Babi. And just as I say my goodbyes, thank you to the Women's Leadership Network at McDonald's South Africa for this platform. It's been such an honor and also a learning curve for me. I think I heard somebody say that we should have more upcoming businesswomen, and this is the one thing that I've done, and I've opened doors to everyone who's aspiring to get into the beauty industry. Because when I came in, I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have somebody to hold my hand. I didn't have somebody to throw opportunities at me. And the biggest thing for me is empowering young girls and teaching them perseverance. So I always say to my students that what took me 7 years to build, I want you to build it in 7 months. So for me, that has been the biggest lesson or the biggest key thing. I want what took me so long to take another woman a much shorter time.
Sure, it's like there's no textbook, but we each have a chapter that we can share with each other. You know, I think that that's such a wonderful way to wrap things up there. Thank you very much, Masego. Let's see, Maureen, your one key learning over your career that you'd like to share with us. I'm sure there are many, 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 as well as anything else you'd like to add in closing.
You know, Pabi, umntu ngumntu ngabantu. Ubuntu, I am because you are, Pabi. Let me tell you why I say this, Pabi. In my whole career, I had the honor and the blessing to share my knowledge and myself, and to be myself with people, and to want to see them empowered. Today, those women are in very strategic and influential positions. Because you know, Pabi, you're first a human being and then an operations director. So now, one day, Pabi, I bought a car and I wanted the best rate. Do you know what happens? A woman that I impacted in one of my careers walks to the credit manager in the bank, one of the 4 big banks. She says, do you know who's this? Do you know who's this? You give her the best rate. This is the woman that contributed to me today being in your EXCO team. Many, many women. So you must always remember that your workplace is not the only place where you're going to operate in. And you need other women. And that is why it's important that you work for an organization that embraces the unique contribution of women and empower them. And it's important that you know that you must have the spirit of Ubuntu, because we all need one another.
Oh, that is super powerful, really. I think that sometimes a career isn't a step ladder that just keeps ascending. A career can be like a children's jungle gym. Sometimes you go up a little bit, sometimes you slide, sometimes you're doing a move straight across, right? But in all of those times and spaces, the workspace, as my phone dies, won't be the only space where you can make the most impact. It can be everywhere in your surrounds. And I just think that that's such a vital thing to remind us and to keep us motivated. Is there one thing that has been the biggest lesson, Joanne? Something that you can share with us?
I think the first thing that came to mind when you posed the question is very often to say to the men and the women that hope is not a strategy. It's a decision that you make, whether you pursue a professional career or whether or not you become an entrepreneur or whether or not you make a decision to be a mother and stay at home. All of those choices are yours to make. The other thing that stands out for me from my career
Please,
is...
can I interrupt you? What do you mean hope is not a strategy? What does that mean?
So what it meant for me is very often women feel they're helpless. You know, I can't ask for this. I can't declare that I'm interested in that position. I can't say no, I refuse to be promoted or to relocate because I've made a decision to have a second born. And those were examples from my own career.
Gotcha.
The last thing I would say to the audience is that as I progressed through my professional career, there was a lot of dialogue around the glass ceiling. But when I reflected on my past, something that stood out for me is something that I refer to as a sticky floor.
Okay.
Every time I did not catapult or accelerate in a role, it was because of my own fear and the limitations that I imposed on myself. And once I let go and I started saying, okay, but yes, how? How do I achieve this? How can I actually do this? It was liberating.
The sticky floor. Beware the sticky floor. My son says the floor is lava. The floor is sticky. The floor is sticky. I have learned so much from this discussion, and truly I believe that those who are about to be read out now, these 10 lucky audience members who will have a chance to have a sit down with Maureen and yourself, Joanne, will have even more to take away. And please, whatever it is that you learn, if it's something that you read, if it's a show that you see, if it's a webinar that you have access to that perhaps, you know, your sister cousin doesn't have access to, share that information. Make that a part of our new culture. We always talk about the new normal. Let that be the new normal, that we share and lift each other up. So congratulations to the following 10: Melisha Pillay, Mutshegwa Motlabi, Tasneem Manganlal, Nosipo Kaluza, Ponso Nchinye, Sdu Ntuli, Dimpo Matrose, Jade Green, Unopa Mazwigwila, as well as Pamela Lupuko. Congratulations to you. That link will be given to you to find out when diaries will be coordinated, and you can chat and you can find out when that's going to be. I truly cannot think of anywhere better to have spent International Women's Day. And that hashtag choose to challenge. You know, in my personal life, it is a health aspect that I choose to challenge, where as women there are special checks that we need to go to once a week, and I've found out over the last little while that there's a space in there that I can contribute my voice, and that's what I've chosen to do. What do you choose to challenge this International Women's Day? Where do you choose to use your power and your agency? Let it be something authentic, and let it be as unique as you are. Thank you so much for being a part of our Women in Conversation webinar this morning. We will share more of the links and let you know how you can be a part of more as we go forward in 2021. Bye-bye.
Choose to challenge.
Big time.